on Hayam and Aleph. 6 lines in the bottom. 6 lines in the bottom of the page.
Still the white lines?
Yeah, second white line.
Okay.
So talking in the Mishnah about 3 ways for Kiddushin: Kesef, Shtar, and Bia. And potentially now a 4th way, and then we'll go back to discussing Kinyan Kesef. Kinyan Kesef will discuss more specifically, most notably as it relates to the Amira. You have to say Harem. So we'll talk about that in a few minutes. I'll begin with potentially a 4th method. It's a little bit of a complicated Gemara, short but complicated. Amar Rav Huna. Rav Huna says, Chopa kainu kal v'chaimer. Rav Huna says is a 4th method of Kiddushin, and that is Chopa. What is the concept of Chopa? Chopa is let's just say Chopa is not the easiest one to explain. Kesef, Kiddushin, and Bia have very clear parameters. There's a disagreement among Rishonim exactly what constitutes Chopa. In other words, what specific action constitutes nisuin or marriage? I would say the general opinion seems to be that it's sort of a hachnosel or shus. The husband brings his now wife into his domain. That's because they live together as a husband and wife, or because they did an event called a chuppah. A chuppah is the canopy. The concept of a chuppah is really 2 things. It expresses that the chuppah is supposed to be an expression of the husband's domain. And it's also supposed to be an expression of letting everybody know that there's a wedding going on and that these people are committing to each other. So Rav Huna says that chuppah works to make Kiddushin as well. Now in the modern day, we use chuppah, we do chuppah and Kiddushin at the same time. So underneath the chuppah, the husband gives his wife a ring, which means that the Kiddushin happens and then immediately there's a chuppah. So Rav Huna's first attempt is to compare chuppah to eating truma. If a woman marries a kayan, then from the moment that there's a chuppah, she's able to eat truma. Kiddushin would not allow her to eat truma. So if chuppah can allow her to eat truma, and Kiddushin can make her eat truma, so it certainly should be that you see chuppah is a stronger type of acquisition, and if money works for Kiddushin, certainly chuppah should also work for Kiddushin. Since chuppah is stronger, chuppah lets her eat truma. Okay. So there's just one problem with that. The kesef and Michael, is it true that money does not allow her to eat truma? Actually, it's not true. Because the truth of the matter is that a woman is allowed to eat truma from the moment of Kiddushin, midaraisa. It's only rabbinically that we prohibit her. Va'amar Ula says, Dvar Torah law is Arusa B'Asral Echels B'Truma. And Arusa eats truma. Shene'amar v'kayin ki yiknin nefesh kinyan kaspai. When a kayin acquires a kinyan kaspai, a monetary, any acquisition through money, including a wife, v'hai kinyan kaspai. And if he gave Kiddushin to his wife, then he's obligated to his wife through an item of value. So why does a woman who's in the state of Kiddushin, why does she not eat truma? So Gemara says, the reason is because we're concerned that during the engagement period, as it were, it's not really engagement, during the Kiddushin period, she's hanging around her father's house and she thinks she can eat truma, maybe she'll give to her brothers and sisters. So that's how the rabbis forbade it. So it cannot be that the source of chuppah is from the comparison of truma, because actually Kiddushin also allows you to eat truma. So el parachachi, The source of Rafuna is as follows. Uma kesef she'ena gomer kaina. Chuppah shegomeres ena din shetekna. Okay, so what's just outline it outside. Basically, what we're saying is as follows. If you remember yesterday, we had three things to learn: kesef, shtar, and bia. Right? So we said, let's say kesef. The Gemara wants to know kesef. Maybe we should learn kesef from amavriya. Just like an amavriya is acquired with kesef, so too a woman's acquired with kesef. Whereas you can't compare it. Amavriya is not a marriage, right? And what was the other argument? Moreover, was that moreover is that Amavriya is talking about a child and an Ira. Maybe that if you learn that Amavriya, it could be that also that the woman would be able to give Kiddushin to the man. Okay, so the Gemara here is going to learn chuppah from all three. From the fact that kesef, shtar, and bia all work, that's a proof that chuppah also works. Because kesef, shtar, and bia all are kinyanim, they're all acquisitions, or they're really acts of acquisition, and they all have other things that they acquire, and they also make a kinyan of Kiddushin. So too, because chuppah is a kinyan, it's nisuin, it should also work for Kiddushin. So we started with kesef, money. Chuppah. Just like money is an act of acquisition, and it works to initiate the kinyan, but it doesn't work to complete it. You can't do nisuin with money. Nisuin has to be chuppah, not money. So chuppah that works for nisuin, sure, it should also work for Kiddushin. So Mara says it's not really a fair comparison because money can acquire a lot more things than just a woman. Malak Esef came pointed by Hekdesh Ma'aser Sheni. Hekdesh money can redeem Hekdesh Ma'aser Sheni, and nothing else can. So you see that there are some unique qualities to the kinyan of kesef, to the kinyan of money, and because of that, maybe that one of those unique qualities is Kiddushin, even though it can't do nisuin. But because kesef is so powerful, kesef could also do Kiddushin. But it's unfair to compare it to chuppah, which can't do so many things. Chuppah is basically kinyan just for nisuin. Maybe chuppah as a kinyan for Kiddushin doesn't work, and there's no proof from the fact that kesef could do Kiddushin. So the Gemara says, okay, bi'atechiach. Okay, well, clearly the component of doing Kiddushin is unrelated to the fact that you can redeem hekdesh. Why? Because there's another kinyan that works for Kiddushin. It's called bia, intercourse. That intercourse is also a very narrow kinyan. It only works by Yavama. Yavama, right? Yavama acquires a Yavama with intercourse. But that's it. And that works for Kiddushin as well. And it doesn't work for Nisuin. So presumably, chuppah that works for Nisuin should also work for Kiddushin. Somebody says, Malad Bia, she can kind of be a Yavama. Well, you can't prove from Bia because chuppah doesn't work by Yavama. Bia does work by Yavama. Maybe that's why Bia works for Kiddushin also. The Gemara says no. The reason can't be linked to Yavama because Kesef will prove that the linkage to Kiddushin has nothing to do with the fact that that this is a kinyan having to do with Yavama. Each one is different. Both Kesef and Bia are different. But the common denominator is these are kinyanim. They work in other scenarios. They work for Kiddushin. Then I like to include chuppah as well because chuppah is also a kinyan. It works for Nisuin, and it should also work for Kiddushin. Okay, okay, hold on a second. There is a common denominator between kesef and bia, which is that they're pleasurable. You get to enjoy the pleasure of money or intercourse. And maybe that's why they can serve as vehicles of kinyanim. However, chuppah, which isn't, maybe the requirement for Kiddushin is that you have to have a pleasurable kinyan. You can't have an awesome meruba. Okay, so what's the solution to that? Shtar, document. Document, there's no pleasure in documents. So nor is a shtar yichiach. Mal shtar shkein maitzi ba'as Yisrael. Shtar is able to divorce. Maybe that's what's able to give Kiddushin. The Gemara says, okay, well, kesef abiyah yichichu, kesef and biyah can't divorce. V'chazor adin, and it goes back and forth. In other words, each one of these is in some way unique, but that's not the point, because clearly the fact that there's a common denominator here means that the common theme has nothing to do with its uniqueness, right? In other words, each one is unique. Why is each one unique? Kesef is unique. Kesef is, first of all, is the universal kinyan. Everything is kesef, right? But most specifically, there are certain things that kesef can do that even shtar can't do, like, for example, redeem ma'aser sheni. So you want to say that maybe Kiddushin is linked to this universal power of Kesef. That's clearly not the case. Why? Because if that were the case, only Kesef worked for Kiddushin. But it's not true. Kesef is not the only kinyan for Kiddushin. It's also Shtar and Biyah. And I can make the same argument with Shtar and Biyah. Shtar, well, Shtar, the reason why you can marry one with a Shtar is because you can divorce her with a Shtar. Doesn't prove anything to Chuppah. Well, that is a nice argument, but that would be true if shtar was the only vehicle of Kiddushin. But clearly it's not. We have Kesef and Biyah as well. So Kesef and Biyah prove that the reason why shtar is Kiddushin is not because shtar is the vehicle of divorce, therefore it's the vehicle of Kiddushin as well. It proves that no, things that are the common denominator between all these three is that they're kinyanim and they work for Kiddushin. So chuppah is also kinyan, it also works for Kiddushin. Okay, well, all hope is not lost. There is another common theme to all these three, which is that there's a component to them that is balkarchay, against her will, forcibly. Okay, let's go through each one. Kesef is the hardest. Well, shtar is easy, right? A woman can be divorced against her will. Yibum, we said, is easy because the intercourse of Yibum could even be a scenario of rape or even unintentional intercourse. Is also kinyan by Yavama. So okay, so it also works balkarchay against her will. Mm-hmm. And the third thing is Kesef. Kesef is the redemption of Amma, the sale of an Amma Ivriya happens against her will too. She's a minor. So all these three things have a component of force that is associated with them. Maybe that's why they work for Kiddushin. But chuppah that doesn't have that should not work for Kiddushin. So Gemara says it's a good argument. However, Rav Huna kesef mia beishus lo yashkchen. With regard to kinyan ishus, meaning a kinyan of a woman's rights, lo yashkchen we don't find. Okay, well, what does that mean? That means that kesef, ultimately speaking, does not work balkarchay as a kinyan ishus. It works to sell an Amma Ivriya, but an Amma Ivriya is not a wife, at least at the point that she sold. She could be a wife at some later point, but because of that, Rav Huna says that you can't really argue that that's a common theme. And therefore, Rav Huna says that chuppah is a method of Kiddushin. According to Rav Huna, there's a fourth method. Rava responds, there are two responses here. The Mishnah says 3, but not 4. And this is a very, very strong argument. It's unfair to even equate chuppah to Kiddushin. Why? You're saying chuppah is a kinyan, but the truth of the matter is chuppah is not really a kinyan. If you remember when we started off by Biyah, we wanted to say that. Let's remember the exact Gemara here. 1 second. Yeah. So yesterday we wanted to prove that Yevama, we should learn Biyah from Yevama, right? Just like Biyah works by Yevama, Biyah should work for Kiddushin. We shouldn't need a pasuk. The Gemara's final argument was you can't compare Kiddushin to Yavama. Why? Because Yavama is a zikuka. It means half the marriage is already done. She's already in a state of marriage. She's already in a state of prohibition. So the Gemara is saying you're trying to say that chuppah should work for Kiddushin because chuppah works for Nesuin. But what is Nesuin? Nesuin is a kinyan that takes place after Kiddushin. It's a fundamentally different type of relationship. It's the kinyan that is minimal itself. Because it doesn't work, because the Kiddushin is already done. So it's sort of a very minimal kinyan. So it's unfair to say that kinyanim that actually work from zero should work, those kinyanim work for Kiddushin, but chuppah that isn't a kinyan from zero. Chuppah is a kinyan that just sort of finishes an already started relationship. That type of kinyan, there's no proof that it would work for Kiddushin. So his argument is klum chuppah gemeris elai de Kiddushin. Chuppah works as a kinyan only because it started from Kiddushin. It's unfair to compare a chuppah that happens after Kiddushin to chuppah that happens without Kiddushin. In other words, if you want to argue that chuppah serves as a vehicle of Kiddushin, that's a chuppah without a Kiddushin. And that's an entirely distinct type of chuppah than a chuppah of a woman that already had a relationship. Meaning the relationship was Kiddushin. And then does the chuppah. Okay. So Abaye tries to respond. He says as follows. The fact that you point out 3, not 4. Because chuppah is a kal v'chomer, so therefore we don't list it in the Mishnah. We only list the things that the Torah specifically mentions. Obviously, the Torah doesn't specifically mention kesef or shtar. But those are learned from comparisons. Those are also included. Chuppah is not even learned that from comparisons. It's learned that from kal v'chomer, therefore it's not included. What about the fact that you're talking about a chuppah that is done after Kiddushin? Rav Huna sort of has a modified version to the argument that sort of addresses that point. He says like this: look at kesef. Kesef works for Kiddushin. Does kesef work for Nesuin? No. So kesef after kesef doesn't work. Same thing with shtar. Shtar works Kiddushin. Shtar work for Nesuin? No. Shtar after shtar doesn't work either. So my kesef she'eni goyim la'achar kesef. Kinda kesef that doesn't work after itself doesn't. Chuppah she'gemeres la'achar kesef ein din she'tekna. Chuppah that does work after kesef for sure it should be in place of the kesef itself of the money, which doesn't really address the fundamental nature, but it is sort of a workaround to avoid having to address the fact that chuppah that's without Kiddushin is fundamentally different. Okay. Toner bottom. We learned what exactly is, how does Kiddushin kesef work? This is basically what we do in the modern day. Not la kesef or shava kesef, you give her money or an item value. You amar la harat mikudeshes li. You tell her you are mikudeshes to me, or you say harat. This is what we say, harat, which is harat mikudeshes. Alternatively, if the guy said harat mikudeshes li, you're an heiress to me. Harat li into, you should be to me to a wife. Harat mikudeshes. These are valid types of Kiddushin. Aval hi shenasna v'amrahi. Let's say she gives Kiddushin to the man, and she says to the man, Hareini mikudeshes loch, I am married to you. Hareini meureses loch, I am meureses to you. Hareini l'chala into, I am your wife. And mikudeshes, that is not a valid Kiddushin. Okay, so you have 2 scenarios. Scenario 1 is where he gave the Kiddushin, and he made the statement about the Kiddushin. Scenario 2 is where she gave the Kiddushin and she made the statement of the Kiddushin. Okay, now what happens if we were somewhere in the middle there? What happens if he gives the Kiddushin but she makes the statement? So Rav Papa has the following question. The reason in the beginning, the first part of the brisa is because he gave the Kiddushin and he made the statement. But if he gave the Kiddushin and she made the statement, the Kiddushin is not valid. 1 second. Let's look at the conclusion of the brisa. She that gives the Kiddushin and makes the statement, it's not valid. Because she gave and she made the statement. But if he gave but she made the statement, have a Kiddushin, that would be a Kiddushin. So which one is correct? In other words, Because again, the first scenario is he gave, he says. The second statement is she gives, she says. But it doesn't address the middle scenario, which is he gives, she says. So what's the story? So if I would just know the first part of the brisa, he gives, he says works. What does that imply? He gives, she says does not work. Right? If I would just know the end of the brisa, she gives, she says doesn't work. Meaning, but if he gave, she said, that would work. So which is it? So the implications of the beginning and the end seem to contradict each other. Together? So Reisha Dafka, the first part of the brisa must be specific. Seifa Katinas, you're right. The end of the brisa is extra; it's not necessary. So the Gemara doesn't like that because it's not just that it's extra. The problem is that it's contradictory.
Right.
Because the implication of the first is contradicted by the implications of the second. So the Gemara rejects this. Tani Seifa Mills Sasra Reisha. Can the end of the brisa contradict the beginning of the brisa? Elahach Kamar. This is what I mean to say. Nasan hu v'amarhu. She did the Hava Kiddushin. He gives. He says it's Kiddushin. Nasan hu v'amarhi. He gives. She says. Nasa kamisha nasan hi v'amarhi v'layav Kiddushin. It's as if she gave and she says. So in other words, the middle scenario is explained by the final scenario. The first scenario is he gives, he says, which implies that if he gives and she says, then it's like the last scenario, which is she gives, she says, it doesn't work. Okay. He gives, he says, works. She gives, she says, doesn't work. Let's say he gives and she says, it's a suffix. We don't know if it's Kiddushin or not, and therefore, rabbinically, we consider there to be marriage.
I feel like I've just been through a clover leaf 4 times.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Next Gemara. Amar Shmuel. Shmuel says the Kiddushin nasan law kesef shava kesef. He gave her Kiddushin, an item value or money itself. Amar, and he says to her, "Harei mikudeshes, harei mereses, harei leintu." What's missing here? He didn't say the word li. So he didn't say to me. He said you are mikudeshes. You have Kiddushin. He didn't say you're mikudeshes to me. Harei mikudeshes, that is a valid form of Kiddushin. Hareini ishech, you're my wife. Hareini, I'm sorry. Hareini ishech, I am your wife. Hareini bailech. I'm sorry. Hold on. Sorry. This is the husband talking. The husband says, Hareini ishech, I'm your husband. Hareini bailech, it's another word for the husband. Hareini arusech, I'm your fiance. Ein kan beis meichosh, these are not valid speakings of Kiddushin. This statement does not suffice to create Kiddushin. V'chein begerushin, the similar thing is true of gerushin. Nasan, he gives her a divorce. Amrlan, he says, Hareit mishulechas, you're sent. Hareit megoreshes, you're divorced. Hareit mitaras l'adam, you're permitted to everyone. Hareit megoreshes, the gerushin is valid. But let's say the guy says, Eini ishech, I'm no longer your husband. Eini balech, same thing, I'm no longer your husband. Eini arusech, I'm not your fiance anymore. Ein kan beis meichosh, these are not valid speakings of divorce. Okay, now the Gemara points out that Shmuel says Kiddushin works even if you don't say the word li. This goes back to an old discussion we've had. We've had it once previously in Kiddushin, and we've had it as well in Nedarim a few times. I'm sorry, Nozer and Nedarim. We last had it in Gittin, actually, toward the end of Gittin, 2 weeks ago, less than 2 weeks ago. Okay, remember this. Remember this. In this scenario, you didn't use the word li. And Shmuel says the Kiddushin works. Why? Because even though he didn't say you're Mekudeshes to me, because he's the one, because the husband is the one giving the Kiddushin, presumably that's included. Okay, but that presumption here is called Yadayim Shem Mechichas. The word li is a handle. It's a yad mechiach, meaning it clearly specifies what exactly is happening. The Kiddushin is happening to me. without the word li, it's the circumstances that imply that the event taking place is happening to me. He didn't actually say to me. So he says, you have Kiddushin. To who? He didn't. Well, the circumstances seem to imply that it's him. This is called Yadayim She'ein Mechichas. Yadayim literally is a handle that isn't. It's not a strong handle. So li is a very clear handle. Li is a handle between him and the event taking place. If he didn't say the word li, it's circumstances, and does that work or not? So while Shmuel saying it works without saying the word li, he clearly holds Yadayim She'ein Mechichas Hav Yadayim. Even though it's not muchach, it's not clear, it still works. But Tanan we learn Ta'omer Aha. If somebody says I am, so well, what does that mean? Harayz a nazir, they're a nazir. The Gemara says but we asked, maybe he means I am fasting. Maybe he means something else. Who knows what it means? Specifically, that there's a nazir who's walking in front of him. So the guy's clearly a nazir, he has long hair, etc. And the guy walks in front of him. So basically, in that scenario, we say that he's an nazir because clearly he means I am like this guy. Time in the nazir over lafanav specifically, if a nazir is literally walking in front of him, so then that's considered a dayam hachichas, and we clearly know what his intention is. But if there's no nazir in front of him, then how do we know what he wanted to say? And therefore, the statement is not a valid statement. So similarly, since he says Harayat Mekudeshes, you have Kiddushin, but he didn't say the word li, that's Yadayim She'ein Mechichas, and it should not work. So the Gemara says when Shmuel made his statement of Harayat Mekudeshes, actually it's talking about the Amar li, where he said the word li. If that's the case, what's Shmuel coming to tell me? Obviously, Harayat Mekudeshes li works. It says it in the Brisa. It's the most obvious thing in the world. It's what everyone does. Harayat Mekudeshes li is a statement of Kiddushin, very clear one. So what's he trying to say? So the Gemara says, Hani Lishni Basroi Kamashmal on top of Vavam and Aleph, 6a. The latter statements were his main point. The latter statements that if you say, I'm not your husband, I am your husband, I am your fiance, those are not valid statements. By Kiddushin, it says that he has to bring the woman to. A man has to take the woman, and he can't take himself to the woman. So if he makes a statement like "I am your husband," he's taking himself and bringing him to the woman, as opposed to saying "Harem Kadeshes Li," you are married to me. That's taking the woman and bringing her to you. The same thing is true with regard to divorce. He has to send the woman away. He can't send himself away. So if he sends the woman away, that's something like you're permitted to marry whoever you want, or you're divorced. If he's sending himself away, it's something like I'm not your husband anymore. Okay. Okay, a bunch of statements here that the Gemara wants to know if these are valid statements of Kiddushin. Okay, maybe I'll need some help with the article. See, Tonar Rabbanon. The rabbis taught, Harayat Ishti, you are my wife. Harayat Arusasi, you're my Arusa. Harayat Knuyali, you are acquired by me. Mikudeshes, these are valid statements of Kiddushin. Harayat Shali, you belong to me. Harayat Bershusi, you're now in my domain. Harayat Zekukali, you're in a state of relationship with me. Mikudeshes, these are also statements of Kiddushin. Lilisninu Kulakachada, why isn't it all in one brisa? Instead of 3 and 3, why don't we just put all 6 of them? All these 6 are kosher. Why did it 3 and these are kosher? Another 3 and these are also kosher. So Mara says Tana Chada Tlas Sheminu. The Tana would say 3 statements at a time, and then write them down. Vigarsin would write them down. So that's why we have these as 2 separate statements, 3 and 3 instead of 1 statement of 6. Okay, the Gemara has a couple of questions here. Okay, Miuchedes, sort of unified. So the verse states when Adam and Eve are told to get married, right? They come to one flesh. So he uses that word for Kiddushin. Miuedesli. Yiud, as we spoke about 2 days ago, Yiud is the process of if a person has an Alma Hevriya, he has a positive commandment to marry her. And that type of marriage is called a Yiud. We'll learn more about Yiud in about 2 weeks when we discuss Alma Hevriya at greater length. as Rossi, Mahu Negdosi Mahu. Okay, so the word, the reference here is as Ezer Kenegdoi. God says, I'll make man a helper, an Ezer. So if he uses that word for his wife to describe it, he says, you're going to be my Ezer now. Or he says, you're going to be Negdosi or Negdi, which is a variant of the word, a variant of the words. You'll be, against me, but really meaning with me. Atsurosi. Atsurosi means sort of gathered together with me. Salose, you'll be my thigh. It's a reference to Adam losing his thigh to create Eve. Sigurosi mahu. When God created Eve, it says he put flesh. He put flesh around the thigh. Mahu. What's the story with the statement of Sigurosi? Is that a reference to Kiddushin?
It's the thigh or the rib.
The rib, I don't know.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah. So let's say it's a rib. I'm sorry, it's a rib. Tachti mahu, you'll be underneath me. Tfusasi mahu, you'll be my possession, I guess. Lekuchasi, my purchase. Mahu, what's the story? Let's try to answer some of these. The Tanya we learned to Aimer lekuchasi harezim b'kudeshes. If a person uses the word lekuchasi, my purchase, that is a statement of Kiddushin. Why? Mishum shenemar, as the verse states, ki yikachesh isha. The statement calls kicha. Kicha is an act of taking, of purchasing something in some way. Ibalu, question. Charufasi mahu. What's the statement of charufa? Now, charufa means sort of set aside, but specifically there's a reference of charufa with regard to a shifcha charufa. So if you have generally speaking, a indentured slaves and maidservants, what we call eved kanani, they're called non-Jewish slaves. They're Jews, but they have a status of slaves because they've been born or forced into servitude. Born in the case they were born to a slave, and forced in the case they were captured in wartime, typically as children. Now, if a person has a slave that he really likes, if he wants, he can choose a maidservant to be in a loyal relationship with him. It's a question exactly the start. Maybe the circumstances are slightly different. That the word for that would also be charufa, set aside. What's the story? Tashma we learned. Titania we learned. Ha'aymer charufasim kedushes. The word charufa is a valid word for Kiddushin. Why? Can be Yehudah karen la'arusa charufa. Because in Judea they call a woman who's an heiress, and they call her a charufa, set aside. The Gemara asks, "Yehudah havarubad alma, is Judea the majority of the world? Like, who cares what they do in Judea?" Hachik Amar. Gemara says, "You're right." Because the Torah says that a maidservant is nechrefes, set aside for a man. Now, another version of this, I told you the version that Shifra Charufa is actually married to a slave. But another version is that a Shifra Charufa is actually a half maidservant, half free woman that's actually married to a free man. That's why she's called a Shifra Charufa. So it is a statement of Kiddushin. And moreover, Yehuda Karen Larusa Charufa. In Yehuda, they also call an Arusa, it's someone who's in the state of Erison, a Charufa, set aside. Okay, so the Gemara says, Yehuda v'ayid l'kram. Does Yehuda have to serve as an addition to the pasuk? In other words, you have a pasuk. Why are you bringing proof from Yehuda? So the Gemara says, the Gemara basically rejects the notion of the pasuk, because the pasuk is, at this point in the Gemara, is not going to be talking about a form of erison, someone who's a chatzi shifra chatzi baschar, half maidservant, half free woman. It's talking about a maidservant who's completely set aside for a specific slave, and therefore it's irrelevant to the concept of Kiddushin, because it's not a Kiddushin. It's charufa, it's set aside, it's a different status. This is what we mean to say. If somebody who's in Judea says you should be my charufasi, then the Kiddushin is valid. She can't be Yehuda Karen Arusa Charufa, because in Judea they call an Arusa a Charufa. Okay, the Ma'askin, what's the circumstances? If we're talking about a scenario where he does not speak, okay, 1 second, hold on. Okay, so here's a general question. When we do Kiddushin, it's pretty obvious that someone's trying to get married here, right? It's pretty self-explanatory. So much so that sometimes, let's say a guy stumbles and actually makes the wrong statement of Kiddushin. Sometimes depends on the rabbi. Some rabbis might immediately they might correct it, but if they don't notice until later, they might say, well, it's obvious. Like everybody knows what's going on here. Right? They printed out wedding invitations. Like, what do you think is happening? So it's sort of but obviously today we do things a little differently than maybe it happened in the past. And by the way, the recommended practice in the past also was to celebrate a erison and to make it clear that an erison is taking place. As a matter of fact, if you give an erison to a random girl on the street, that was justified for penalty of lashes, just for disgracing a woman that way. It's not appropriate. You don't just find a woman on the street that's pretty and attractive and just give her Kiddushin. It's not appropriate. And we'll see. We'll get to it in about a week, less than a week. There's a few things you got penalties for, just disgraceful behavior, and this is one of them. The other one is Kiddushin bia. A man marries a woman by having intercourse with her. It's not appropriate. You have Kiddushin, prepare yourself for marriage, then get married, and then you can have intercourse with her. Okay. Anyway, so what's the scenario here? Are we talking about where this is like a wedding? It's clear that there's Kiddushin going on, or not? The Kiddusha. So there was no conversation here with regard to either her divorce in the case of divorce or Kiddushin in the case of Kiddushin. If that's the case, how does she know what these words mean? Like sigurosing, you're the flesh around my bone. Like who says she knows that means Kiddushin? It's talking about where they were talking about getting married. So they have this convocation to get married. Or the opposite for divorce. If that's the case, nami. Even if they don't say a word, it works also. The Tanam we learned, okay, so they have this convocation either for divorce or for marriage, and they're talking about getting married, and then he gives her an item of value. And the circumstances indicate that this is the Kiddushin, just like today. If one of the witnesses didn't hear the Kiddushin, like he obviously saw what was clearly intended for Kiddushin. So then it works, even without any statement at all, because it's clear what's going on. And the halacha is like Rabbi Dovid that says that's enough. Just giving it is enough. You don't have to explain. Okay, so if they were discussing Kiddushin, then obviously this item is an item of Kiddushin. So the Gemara says, Amri, the answer is as follows. We're talking about where they had a conversation about getting married or getting divorced. So we're having this get together. We know what's going to happen. The idea of love shasik, if he would have given her and been silent, then it's true that the divorce or the Kiddushin would be valid, because the circumstances alone suffice to give an explanation for the event taking place, i.e. Kiddushin or Gerushin. But what are we talking about? He gave her using one of these words. So he spoke out one of these interesting terminologies. This is the question. Take them. So in other words, these statements, like, you are my rib, is that a statement of Kiddushin, or is that a statement of work? Maybe she's agreeing to work for him. Maybe he's basically, in other words, maybe if this could be understood as working for me, so then actually he's removing the context of Kiddushin and saying, "Oh, I'm not giving Kiddushin. I actually want you to work for me, be my rib," or something like that. One of these terminologies. The Gemara says, "Take away." It's not. It remains unresolved. Right.